All right, welcome to another Paddles 101. This is episode 4. Got myself, Jason Aspis, along with Curtis Cruz from Pickle Pro Labs. Curtis, how are you today?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. We tried to do this before we both went on the road, and it didn't work. So
Yeah, it's
we're
been a long time
delayed.
coming.
It's
Yeah, a
been a
little
long
bit of a
time.
gap between episodes 3 and 4.
Yes, absolutely. But I'm excited to get this going. I think we got a lot of questions that I want to get answered. I got a question from Ken in Brooklyn. This is from a few weeks ago because this is before we both went away. But he asked essentially, how do we ensure there's no conflict of interest in paddle certification, given the manufacturers pay a fee, they're paying it to UPAA. UPAA is under UPA. Right now we are a for-profit business. So I understand, and that's been a topic of conversation all along. And just to be clear, we are in the process, UPAA, of becoming a not-for-profit entity. And so that will take place before the end of the year. We've stated that from beginning, or I guess middle of last year, that was the step we were going to take, and we are well on our way to doing that. Because you've been in this space for a long time. Tell me a little bit about kind of the history of some of these governing bodies and how they maintain their integrity and build trust with the organizations and the fans and the players and the manufacturers.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple ways that it happens. First, it comes down to the people, making sure that the people that are operating the testing in the lab and that run the organizations are trustworthy in the first place. Because at the beginning, there's a lot of trust involved, and there's asking for people's trust to trust that you are doing what you say you're going to do. So a big part of that at PPL is, right, everything we do, we publish the white papers. We have way more information out there than frankly needs to be, but it seems reasonable that we publish all the information we have. We're not in the business of keeping secrets, right? We're not trying to make a black box that other people can't replicate or don't understand. We're in the business of helping manufacturers, helping the industry grow so that everybody's on the same playing field. And so in other sports, typically the research begins in a university, for example, right? A governing body will approach the lead researchers in a certain area, ask them to develop a test, and it kind of stems out from there. Historically, that's what's happened, whether it's been baseball, football, golf's a little bit unique. But all the industries, that tends to be the course of action. And it was similar here, although one of the differences that what we're doing in pickleball is fundamentally very similar to what already has been done in baseball and softball. So there didn't need to be the foundational research in the process and developing that process. It was all the details that needed to be worked out. And so myself, having worked extensively in the baseball, softball side, working with other people that have been in and around that space for a long time, we put together the protocols, put together the studies to do the research and to understand the true differences between the baseball, softball, pickleball, and understanding what the key variables were, what are the things we need to focus on, how do we make sure that what we're doing is appropriate. And then once that's done, right at the beginning, there is some trust because that equipment that we're using is not ubiquitous yet. Every manufacturer doesn't have it. It is now widely available, and many manufacturers either have secured those test equipments and testing capabilities. Many others have already purchased it but not yet taken receipt. So now that that becomes much more commonplace, there's less trust involved, less of us saying, trust us, we have it right, because now other people are able to reproduce it themselves, right? So that's my point. It's not that there's no trust involved still. My point is that other people can do things, and so it's less of a black box because other people are out there doing the same things.
Got it. And just to kind of recap, when you say that you worked in the baseball space, in what capacity were you along that journey of getting baseball in the introduction of BB Core into the sport?
So in early 2000s, I was at Washington State University at the Sports Science Laboratory. Myself, three others, and Dr. Lloyd Smith were the founding members, and Dr. Lloyd Smith is still there, still oversees that lab, and they do great work. Ron Radagonda, actually, who works with us, who you know certainly, he was at that point the chairman of ASA softball, and he approached Washington State University and asked us to develop a method for measuring the performance of baseball and softball bats, because the methods that were existing at the time, they had to test out in NYU, and manufacturers found a way to work around it, and you had people that made bats that met these standards of the day, but were able to hit the ball 30, 40, 50 feet farther than ever before. And it just turned the industry on its head. And so ASA put the funds forward, financed a lot of my studies as a graduate student, and a number of us put together some pretty fun theses, and built equipment that measures the performance of baseball and softball bats. And so that canon, that system of testing that Lloyd Smith really led the way on, we built that equipment, designed the test, worked with ASTM in writing the standards and drafting those protocols, and then through the years I've implemented that not just at the certification side, but also in industry in multiple countries and continents around the world.
And so when we apply our version of methodology to the ASTM that exists for BB-Core, for baseball, or ball bat coefficient of restitution, and now when we bring it to pickleball, what needs to be done? Like, we did need to do some homework on that, right?
Yeah, so the ASTM standard itself, ASTM 2219, that's the methodology that tells you how to measure the performance of a bat, essentially, with a ball hitting it, right? And so that tells you the parameters of what types of speed tolerances you need on the machine, what type of spin tolerance you have to have, the ability to read the speed of the bat after rebound, things like that. It doesn't tell you exactly what equipment to buy, but it tells you all of the details for how to operate the test and what you must be able to measure when running the test. And so ASTM does a really good job of fundamentally laying out the process. And from there, it's up to the governing bodies to say, okay, this is the process. This is the right tool to use to measure performance, but we're interested in these factors. And so for us, right, when you guys come to us and say, we want to have a standard that does this, we need to first say, okay, well, we have to understand the ball, and we have to understand all of the different parameters. And so in other videos we've talked about, and the tours we've given of the lab, we spent a lot of time talking about the research that went into the ball. We spent 5, 6, 7 months working on ball studies, looking at balls with no holes, balls with holes, balls from different manufacturers, different temperatures, different speeds, all these different things to find what are impact orientations, you name it. We looked at all the variables to best understand what can we simplify and what do we need to really follow through every last detail to make sure we're not missing anything. And so that was a big part of the secret sauce in what we're doing, and now that's all laid out very clearly in the white papers on our site to explain why we do what we do. And we certainly believe that it provides the most appropriate measure of performance for pickleball paddles and how it relates to how they perform in the lab and also on the court, right? Because if we had thrown out some of those variables, we could have made the test faster and easier for us to do, but it would have resulted in performance metrics that didn't necessarily line up with what people see on court. And in my background, at least, when you have a standard that's trying to be implemented and it doesn't correlate with what people see and feel and believe, you've got a problem, because nobody's ever going to trust the information that comes out of it. And so we spent a lot of time on that. And, I know that you were involved closely in that, but that's a key part of what we did.
Yeah, and I would say it doesn't stop there, right? We are still doing ball analysis work up in UMass Lowell. They continue to find new studies. They're digging away at all sorts of, factors of the ball in different balls. So it doesn't really matter what ball we end up using, everything has a ball factor to it, and so we can get it to kind of some baseline. Is that
Graduate student engineers in the lab, graduate engineers, right? They've got advanced degrees. We've got an entire team that is not only doing the testing for certification, but also doing the research as well. And then we also kick things off to UMass Lowell and Dr. Patrick Drain, working with his team as well, so that we have long-term research, short-term research, interesting projects that really teach us about the next thing to look at, right? So we talked a lot about ABI and break-in and what do we do to analyze that. And we've implemented a short-term solution, and now we've got a long-term solution, that equipment that's automated that now is ready for delivery, and we're going to start to work through that process to even more simply define to the industry what that process is and how effective it can be.
in which multiple manufacturers have already purchased
Yep.
and will receive soon.
That's
So
right.
yeah, so it's good. I mean, I feel really good about it. I feel great that what we're doing in the background that we don't talk about is shedding so much light onto the issues that we see in the marketplace. One of the things that we're moving towards, a new kind of shift that we released early last month, was moving from a model name to a model number, or the addition, I should say, of a model number being required on all paddles to be in play at the pro level starting September 1st. And obviously all paddles starting September 1st will need to be fully certified from UPAA. That's a kind of monumental shift in where we've been. Up till now, we've had provisional approval and interim certification was allowed. And that was good. I felt pretty good about that. But September 1st is going to be the first true mark of everybody's on the same level playing field.
We're excited about it because the implementation of the model numbers it's going to be super nerdy, right? Like the consumer is not going to care. But from our standpoint, from a compliance standpoint, the people we have on site, the simplicity of understanding this is the code and this is tied to this certification makes everybody's life so much easier than, well, wait, this is named paddle XYZ, but there's 8 versions of paddle XYZ, and one is blue and one is red, and this one's in italics and this one's in bold. Like, what does all that mean? How do we know, Jason, is this approved? Is that approved? Everybody's life gets easier on the compliance side when there's a more official and grown-up standard and process.
Yeah, and the model number is the model number for the life of that paddle. And so if you want to make it red or blue or green or put a rainbow on it, it doesn't matter what the design is, as long as that paddle plays the same way it has always played. Same shape, same size, same thickness, same material, same construction. Nothing changes, but you can have it be a player signature model. It could have a different edge guard. It doesn't, you can dress it up any way you want. As long as that number stays the same, we hold you accountable for it performing the same.
Yep, absolutely right.
So I just want to go back to what we were talking about with the ball correction and all the work that goes into, bringing an ASTM to our sport, to applying that to the testing, to figuring out the test and how it all works. That's real science, right? We went to UMass Lowell, as you mentioned. Obviously, you worked with Washington State when you were doing it with baseball. But it requires a university, right? Like you mentioned that before. You go to academia to get this kind of stuff done, and teams of engineers and grad students to be able to do this kind of work at scale. In an academic environment that gets, I guess, pressure tested amongst their peers.
It's something almost that has to be done in academia, frankly, because there's not really any money involved, right? So, like for a business that's in the business of testing paddles, for example, for them to dedicate their livelihood to create an ASTM standard, they don't own that ASTM standard. They're not selling it to somebody. Nobody's paying them to do it. It just is the right thing to do in order to advance the sport and make the game better. So that's one of the things that Patrick Drain is doing, is looking at the ASTM standards, and is what we're doing unique enough that it demands its own standard, right? And so you've got differing opinions there. They've got boards they meet with and different ASTM groups and panels to discuss those things with. And so, we try to stay out of the minutia of that conversation. Our goal is simply to find the best ways to implement those tests, and then we leave it to the true research groups to make sure that the proper protocols are put in place and the standards are in place with the proper authorities and ASTM bodies and things like that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. You were in Atlanta a year ago. It was about a year ago.
I was. Yeah.
It was a pretty contentious meeting that we had with some
There were some memorable moments
with some of the committee members. In all seriousness, over the past year, really, I thought walking out of that meeting, I was really questioning, like, is this going to happen? I had no understanding of the resistance that we were going to face, because I thought we were doing all the right things the right way for the right reasons, but we were met with serious resistance. I think I hope we've won people over the last year. We've done things methodically through both academic channels, through real science and real engineering prowess. We've invited everybody into the lab to see what we're doing. We publish everything. Are you surprised at how things have gone over the last year, or is this what you expected to happen?
I would say it's closer in line with what I hoped would happen, at least. It's hard to say because you've got so many competing factors with. There's the right and the wrong of testing, and then in my world, that's all I can control. That's all that the lab and our engineers there can control is what we do. I can't help necessarily convince people that one league is better than the other, or one group is doing it better than another, or that somebody's virtues are different or better, whatever. Like, there's so many variables we can't control. Our focus all along has been simply, okay, there's a clear path forward for what the league wants and how the standards should work and how it should affect the game. And that gives us a very crystal clear path forward. So from my standpoint, our job is easy because we just keep our head down and focus on exactly what we're doing. Everybody else has the hard job of the soft skills and working with everyone and making sure that everybody's on the same page and constantly communicating and over communicating and re-communicating and apologizing and like just going through that whole process over and over and over. For us, I always trust in the science and the numbers and the things we're doing, but I am certainly pleasantly surprised that everybody seems to be coming around. Some slower than others, certainly, but I don't think there's a lot of pushback to the fundamental science behind what we're doing. Not a whole lot of criticisms in the process. Not everybody loves the outcomes, but I don't hear a whole lot of arguments about what we're doing any longer.
One thing that has kind of alarmed me recently, watching some of the reviews of paddles that are not necessarily in our ecosystem, but I feel like every week I hear a reviewer say, this is the hardest hitting paddle we've ever seen. That concerns me because we really shouldn't be hearing that anymore, right? We should all, both regulatory bodies should have, limits in place that we shouldn't hear anyone say this is the hardest hitting paddle I've ever played with.
It's an interesting point you bring up because what I think is alarming that you point out is that it happens like every 10 days, every 2 weeks, right? That is problematic. If that happens once a year, that's kind of to be expected. If you look at other sports, right? You look at baseball, you look at softball, you follow some of the other review sites. You'll hear once a year, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I don't know how it got passed and how it got certified. And you know what? Sometimes that stands the test of time and that bat kills it in the marketplace for 8 months and sometimes they get decertified, whatever. Like that, it plays itself out. But you don't hear that week in and week out. It's not like, oh, this is the latest and greatest. This is the latest and greatest. But in pickleball, there seems to be a lot more of that. And, that either is the hype machine doing its job, or maybe the all of the certification processes aren't equally as effective in all of the governing bodies.
When you were working in baseball and softball, Was it as contentious? I know, actually, I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna put this up on a tee for you. Like, tell me some anecdotal stories of, you know. By the way, let me preface it by saying this. When I thought I was in crazy town, that I was like, "What's going on? Why is everyone yelling?" It was like, "Oh, this is how it works." Let me tell you some stories. So I do want to kind of let you communicate a couple of those that you can tell.
Yeah, no, and really, if you want the real good stories, you'll have to talk to Ron because Ron's the one who literally was in your role at the time, and he was the one that was pioneering the process, and he was the one running through the glass walls, right, taking all the abuse and shielding everybody from it because he believed in the process and what was being done. So it's hard because when you have a standard that is changing, right? Change generally isn't good for the leader, right? And oftentimes the leaders in a marketplace are the ones who then fight change the most. And so you end up with competing interests. You have some people that want things to change, some people that definitely don't want them to change, and then some people that file lawsuits to prevent the change and make personal attacks and do all kinds of things, right? There's all kinds of craziness that goes on. And businesses are businesses, but all the people that represent them have personalities and treat other people differently. And so you have, all the things that we've all experienced. There's some people that take the change with a smile on their face, and others that go down swinging. And I don't know if any sport is different than another. Right? I've seen it in football. I've seen it in baseball. I've seen it in softball. And people get probably just because they're passionate about it. But the things they're passionate about, man, they care a lot about, and they're willing to let their feelings heard.
Well, I'm gonna let you go on this, but I will say that I do agree with the feelings part, particularly in pickleball. In a lot of these businesses are family businesses. They connect with their loved ones on the court. It is such a personal sport because you play with your wife, your kids, your parents. Like, it is a community thing. A lot of people they define themselves by their pickleball network and their community. And so that makes it a lot more sensitive than a baseball game or a basketball game or whatever other sport you could name, because this is really deeply rooted in people's, conscious and their life. And so I get it, and I see it all the time when I read the comments, and people are, right now they're angry about duper, whatever it is that they care about. It's because they do care, and I always have to remind myself that passion is a good thing. It doesn't always manifest itself the way I want it to, but if they didn't care, we'd have a lot more problems. So
Yeah.
I'm feeling like while it's not easy, people care for a reason, and that's great. And we want them to care, and we want to do it right. We want to do them right. So we're trying, and we're going to keep on trying to be open about it, and have these kinds of chats and talking on Twitter and Facebook and whoever else you can talk to us. So Curtis, I appreciate the time, and we'll be back here in a couple of weeks.